P.O.P podcast, let's go. The P.O.P podcast, let's go. The P.O.P podcast starts now.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of the P.O.P podcast, Brace for Impact series, where we uncover the remarkable stories behind the most successful orthodontics in the industry. I'm your host, Jason Sirotin, joined by my co-host, Scott Haley. Each week, we sit down with leading orthodontists to explore their journey to success and the challenges they faced and the innovations that they see their practice apart. Whether you're an aspiring orthodontist, a seasoned professional, or just fascinated by the business of braces, this is a show that will inspire you to think differently about orthodontics and beyond. Let's dive into today's story. And Scott, who do we have with us today?
We have Dr. Mike Bicknell, good friend from Chicago, and member of our group P.O.P as well, a premier orthodontic practices. I'm excited to have Mike here. Let him share a little bit about his journey into orthodontics. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott. Nice to be in with you, Jason. I'm looking forward to just having a nice chat about orthodontics. Obviously, I'm a little bit of an ortho geek. My occupation is orthodontics. My pastime is orthodontics. My multiple jobs are orthodontics. I don't have a whole lot of other hobbies, which maybe makes me a little bit unbalanced. But from what I'm reading, most people that try to achieve a lot of things don't have any balance. So that's me.
I certainly don't have balance either, so I think it's okay.
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit about, tell everybody about your practice? How did you get started? Where did your journey begin?
Yeah. So, every story has a start, a middle, and an end, right? So mine started a long time ago, back at University of Illinois in Chicago. I went to dental school. I was able to get into orthodontics quite quickly. So I finished in 2002. And in 2002, it was interesting, right? We were just on the verge of, quote, what digital meant. And all really digital meant back in 2002 was having a digital x-ray machine and a digital camera. Like that was literally digital. But things were coming online. There was this kind of like idea of having a computer system to work on your back-end systems for management, right? Dolphin was in its infancy. And there was this transition of this paper charting, very, very like crude records to this idea of what was a great practice. So when I got out of residency, it just seemed like at that time, the people that were hiring, I wasn't necessarily wanting to work for. The people that I wanted to work for weren't necessarily hiring. So I took a job in a really large group practice. Their orthodontist was leaving. It was a really good opportunity for me to get a job further away from where I lived so that I could start my own practice. That's really what I wanted to do. Interestingly enough, when I took that job, I thought it was just for a paycheck. But what I really learned was a ton. I showed up there and it was a very interesting practice. They had a lot of patient volume. It was all internally referred, but there wasn't a lot of systems. They didn't really have anything about scheduling or records or, charting or treatment plans. So what I found myself doing for the first few years was really building systems to organize patient flow, organize the patient experience, make my case outcomes really, really as high as they could be. And that was just something that was a blessing in disguise, right? And then I decided to start my own practice close to my house, which is in Elmhurst, Illinois, right outside Chicago. And I used all of those learnings to create what I consider to be an ideal practice. I bought whatever the technology that I could that was the best at the time. I really started to dive into what the best appliances were. I found myself kind of looking at a group of people that were all achieving some really high and beautiful results. And they all seemed like they were having fun doing it, right? So kind of how I led myself to the Damon system is the community of people were just great. I went to a couple Damon forums and just saw a ton of energy. At the same time, I was doing the Angle Society and, there was a lot of dogmatic thinking, which was great. But, I just really wanted that progressive energy that would catapult my practice into something great. So started doing that. And, like all new practice owners realize is that it's fun until the doors open, when you're spending somebody else's money, and you're creating a dream, it's great. And then you show up the first couple of days and the phone doesn't ring and bills start piling up and all these things that you thought were going to happen just don't, right? People don't magically call you because you're a great person. So then the work starts and spent a lot of years digging in and doing a lot of grassroots marketing, creating a brand, whatever that meant at the time. It was just basically trying to put out myself as far as a good high functioning orthodontist, and spent a lot of time doing that. Journeyed through, started doing some education, back at University of Illinois, did some lecturing in local communities, societies, and even for Ormco, and found myself just really learning and getting better and better and better. And somewhere around 2016, 17, we took on an associate, we bought another practice. And from there, I started seeing what scaling was doing, right? And, I realized that systems were even more important, because when it was just me working 3 days a week, I can manage it all, right? And when I realized that we went to multiple offices, we doubled our team, we had, other orthodontic professionals involved. It's when I really realized that clean, concise systems were going to lead to something that was scalable. And that was the infancy and the testing grounds for where we are now. That was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And, it just seems like I've got an amazing team, some really, really creative, educated people on it. And we just take every single project and we try to refine it to make it better. And it's just been a ton of fun. So, that's where we are now.
That's incredible, Mike. We talk to a lot of doctors that are in that beginning phase, right? Where they just bought an older doctor's practice or they're about to do a startup. And I feel the stress for them. So, I suppose everyone's journey is different, right? Like sometimes it takes a little longer and all those things, but any words to those younger doctors about giving them the confidence and courage that, maybe that you had, that you could do this, right? Because I think a lot of younger orthodontists sometimes don't think there's a place for a doctor to do a startup or even to buy a practice now for whatever reason. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think the people, it's like anything, right? I think most people that come out of residency have the energy and they have the desire, and then they're just kind of crushed by other people saying that you can't do it. It's not the right environment. It's too expensive. You're not going to make any money. You're competing against this. There's all these things that people tell us, but the abilities that they have, the fact that orthodontics is a successful business model, right? Our margins, even at the worst, are okay. It's just that you've got a lot of high functioning people who create and know how to get through hoops. And what happens when they open the practice is it becomes a little bit of a slowdown, right? And all of the expectations that we have and all of the markers that we try to achieve are very difficult to get to. So when you're talking to somebody who's just recently opened, they're very pessimistic about their growth. But then when you talk to somebody who's been open for a while, you're like, look, you'll get there, right? And that process is what's fun, right? Because you are creating something that's your own. You have the steering wheel in front of you. You do have a gas pedal. It's just sometimes it doesn't react the way that you want. My recommendation is that I think a lot of people focus on their brand and marketing and essentially trying to get the phone to ring. And that's great. But I think that at the same time, you have to focus on you. You have to invest in yourself. You have to get better faster. And that only happens when you invest in yourself. I think that one of the problems I see with a lot of new people coming out of school is that they've learned something and then they don't invest in their abilities because they feel that they can do a great job straighten teeth and that's all that matters. And that's great. But when you get into private practice or you create your own practice, if you don't feed that person, then you're just going to feed the business model. And then 5-10 years down the road, you're going to have maybe a successful business, but then maybe you're lacking in efficiencies, you're lacking in treatment modality, you're lacking in outcomes. And it's very difficult to go backwards and train yourself on how to do something more efficiently and a little bit better when you're busy, right? So my advice is do both. When you have time, get really good at what you're doing. Go to CE, learn the new techniques, find something that makes you incredibly efficient. Because I can tell you, we are having a big talk about management. When you hire consultants and you learn how to manage your practice, if you look at creating beautiful smiles faster with less appointments, with a higher outcome, that solves a lot of management problems, right? And I just did a presentation the other day where we were looking at some data that was very, very common. It was created by some people in the industry that look at objective data, and looking at 27 months as the average treatment time for orthodontics with 22 visits. That's fine, but if you can do it in 17 months with 10 visits, you're twice as profitable, and it makes it easier to be successful. So my recommendation is, yes, dig in, you can do it, but at the same time, invest in yourselves and get really good. Even though you have time, it's very, very beneficial to learn how to do what we do in a way that's highly efficient and highly effective.
Can you tell us about where your practice is now and how big it is and what you have going on there?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. We, originally I didn't know I wanted to be a multiple practice owner. I figured I would just start one practice and just, live my best life. And that's what we did for a while. So, we grew our practice from essentially scratch to probably a 400 case start practice. And I was happy in that range, right? It was meeting all my metrics. My life was great. I was working a few days a week. But, what happened was, what I found is that I wasn't at that practice necessarily to lead it as much. And, even though I was creating this environment of a great, quote, work-life balance, it wasn't really necessarily what I wanted, because even though when I was off, I was disassociated from the practice, when I came back, it seems like I was disassociated as well. So, a few years of living that life, I just found that I was really happy when I was in the office. I just didn't want to have to work to the level where it was unsustainable. So I moved back into the office, knowing that I was going to not worry so much about being crazy efficient with my time at the practice, but try to get crazy efficient with my treatments. And that allowed me to do more things in the office. So right around 2014, 15, 16, we just really started dialing things in. And again, I was hired an associate. We bought another practice in a little bit of a different demographic. Currently, my main office is in Elmhurst, Illinois, which is a pretty affluent, slightly diverse suburb of Chicago. There's about 60,000 people. There's maybe 5, 6, 7 orthodontists. And we've been functioning here for 20 some years. The practice that I purchased was in a little bit more of an urban environment, different demographic of people. It was at the time associated with a P.O.P practice. So we split that from the P.O.P practice and then created one umbrella of a brand. We brought it under the Advanced Orthodontic Specialists brand. Basically have one community of patients, 2 locations, one team. We fall under that because I just like it. It's very hard to run multiple practices with different core values. And we wanted one set of core values, one set of operating kind of procedures, and we want to do it under one brand. So we've got 2 practices. Currently, they're both about equally as busy. We're maybe in the, from a patient start standpoint, probably about 800 patient starts between the 2 offices. The last few years have been a little bit interesting. We've been a little bit flat, but at the same time, we're doing fine. Our relative case fee is pretty high. It's more at the top tier of the national average. And we justify that by giving people an amazing experience, short treatment times, and we really, really try to get patients in and out of treatment in the least amount of time with the best possible experience. So we're really focused on outcome and efficiency, and we figure, it's kind of interesting. I do this presentation where I talk about the ultimate service is the outcome. And I think in a day of distractions, a lot of people look at service as the frills that you get when you're somewhere. It might be a coffee machine if you're getting your tires changed, or it could be a massage chair at the orthodontic office, all the way up to having a Starbucks in your location, right? But in reality, people want the outcome. They're not coming to you because you pour a good cup of coffee. They're coming to you because you need to straighten teeth. And if you can do that really well in a shorter period of time, then you don't need as many distractions that we call service. So for us, the ultimate service is expert treatment done in a very, very comfortable environment where we respect time and we get the job done as good as possible. If not, as we like to hold ourselves to a high standard and think that some of the best treatments that you can provide, but doing it in a very, very efficient way. So that's where we are right now, and I'm really enjoying it. We've got a great community of patients. We've got a really good team, and it seems to be working out quite well.
You mentioned speaking. It seems that you have a pretty illustrious career on the speaking circuit. What are you doing on these talks? What is your goal? What do you get out of it? You mentioned earlier that you're a big orthodontics dork and that, you want to, your hobbies are orthodontics and everything that you do is. So if you could kind of take us through that part of your life, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So, it all started probably in residency. When I was in residency, I just really enjoyed figuring out how to teach other residents how to do something that I already learned. And I think it comes down to that idea that if you could teach it and you could teach it in simple terms and somebody understands it, then you probably know it yourself, right? And I always found that if I couldn't teach it, then I didn't know it. So I would study it harder so I could teach it. And that all started at University of Illinois. Right when I graduated, my department head at the time asked if I would stay and teach, and I really enjoyed that. But then time just got away from me. It was a little bit of a crunch. I had a new family. I was trying to teach, run a business. So I slowly backed off from the university teaching. And then, I was aligned with Ormco because I was using all Ormco products. I was going to the Damon forums and saw all the people speaking. And to be honest, it sounds kind of arrogant, but I was critical. I started getting pretty critical of what people were doing. And I started seeing speakers present the same material. They didn't look like they put a lot of effort and time into it. Some did, believe me, some did, but some didn't. And I kind of got mad because I kind of felt that my time was worth a lot. I was taking time away from my family. I was spending money going to these courses. I had to shut down my office. So when I went to a lecture and it wasn't good, I was kind of upset, right? And I started becoming highly critical and maybe a little bit outspoken with that. And then a couple people at Ormco maybe noticed that and said, hey, why don't you take a shot at doing some educating? And at that time, it was different. There was so much CE. They could send me down to a study club in Florida and I could talk to 25 orthodontists or, a study club in Ann Arbor. And I was going to all these different small study clubs, meeting orthodontists that shared some of the same struggles that I did from a practice standpoint. The problem was there were so many people on the stage that were focusing on clinical orthodontics that there wasn't a lot of room. So funny enough, in 2012, I had some, like most people in their 40s, I had a lot of soul searching and I started reading a ton of books on purpose and drive. And all I did was take, what I learned in those books and I applied it to an orthodontic practice. And next thing you know, I'm like the guru in the mental space for orthodontists. And I did that for a couple of years and I didn't really want to stay in that realm because I really loved clinical orthodontics, but it really got a foot in the door. And then slowly but surely, they ask you to do something on orthodontic finishing or something about your process with aligners. And every time they would ask, I would create something. And what it really did was it really forced me to get better at my own craft, right? So when you have to go up and present something and you care about what you're presenting, you work infinitely hard to create content that is the best thing that you can do. So what I found was when I had to do a presentation, I worked harder in my clinic. We took better photos. I was a better finisher. I worked harder to get better results on all of my cases. I worked harder to be more efficient. And it was weird. It was this dog chasing its tail that because I had an opportunity to teach, it made me better because I asked more questions. If I didn't know an answer, if somebody asked me, hey, what is the torque couple in the first order on this bracket? And I was like, I don't know. First thing I would do is I'd say, I'll go find out. And I would call the engineers and I would find out. And I taught myself so many things that I didn't know. And what I also realized is I didn't know a lot of things, right? That whole adage, the more I know, the less that I know. It just became this super cool passion. So then finally, we started doing a lot of speaking, a lot of presentations. I enjoyed that. My family got to take part in it, right? My wife and my young child and some of my kids, depending on schools and sports, I always try to drag them along with it. And they became part of this community. A lot of people that I would go to communities, they would see my family and I together. And it just created these really cool experiences and memories. And secondly, I just like to create stuff. Like there's a weird creative side of my brain that when I sit down with a case and I try to figure out a really great way to present it so that it's effective and simple, it's just a part of your brain that it starts triggering. And that's my creative space. Right. So I can treat a great case, but how can I get that case into a computer so that somebody could look at it and see it? And that became another really great obsession. And, people always ask when I do presentations, like, who makes your slides? And, I'm really proud to say that I make all of them. I make every piece of content that I do. Proud of my team. We take, 7 sets of photos on every single patient through it comes to the practice, which I've done the math, costs hundreds of thousands of dollars for our practice to absorb just to take this content. So, I could go on, but the whole speaking thing has just opened me up to a group of people who want to learn. And I think that's the most addictive side of it, is when you go to a local dental meeting, or you go to, Southeast Asia and have to speak to 400 people. Everybody's there for the same reason. They want to get better. And if I can be a part of that community, it really makes me really happy, because from a practicing standpoint, we've kind of got it figured out. I can come to work and treat great cases and be profitable and be efficient and have plenty of time off. But there's just something about this stage of my life that I really want to try to unlock the secrets that I've learned and try to give them to people earlier. One last thing that I can kind of say that really helps with that is that I remember telling my associate after she worked for me for a few years that, I felt that she jumped the line. It took me 15 years to get where it took her 3 years. And I think that's awesome. If we have more people in this profession that can become better faster, our profession is going to take on a larger lion's share of the orthodontic treatments that are there in the world. And that's important to me. So for me, it's about teaching the secrets, teaching the tricks, and trying to get people to a higher level of clinical orthodontics, or even managerial orthodontics, faster. It makes me happy.
For our listeners that don't know Mike as well as we do, Mike, you've been a global speaker for Ormco for a lot of years. You've been all over the world. Maybe just share with us, has there been some interesting, when you see all the orthodontists in other cultures, you've probably had to learn and experience so many incredible things, but is there a group of people that have surprised you with their outlook on orthodontics?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I think that we are in a bubble in the United States, right? The United States has been, let's talk it historically, maybe not currently, but historically, I think the field of orthodontics stems from the United States, then generates to, around the world, right? Because, when I was a resident, all of the articles, all the journals, all the textbooks, all the department heads, were the people that were crafting the message of orthodontics. And when you really think about it, there wasn't social media. You couldn't get, unless you went to a course, it was very difficult to learn something. Manufacturers can't create instruction booklets because, they have to have one step removed for legality reasons. So the manufacturers hire people to then teach what they do in their practice, right? But what I've learned as I go around the world is some of the brightest people I've met are people that just don't have access to education, right? I spent time I was a keynote speaker in India, and there was 500 orthodontists in this crowd, and they were asking me questions and so interested in learning. And then I went to a small meeting where they had their speakers kind of talk about their cases. And it reminded me something that happened 15 years ago for us, right? And it was kind of sad because a lot of the people were so dedicated to their craft, but they just didn't have the resources, one, for appliances, and two, for education to utilize it. And I just thought that was really unfair, right? So, as I started going more into Asia, Southeast Asia, not so much Europe. Europe, I think, has a lot of ability to take what we have, and I think the market there is pretty good. So, the manufacturers are selling their products quite quickly after they sell them in the United States. But when you get into the emerging markets, and I get it, right? The manufacturers can't just dump their products in the emerging markets right away, because they have to they have to make some money when they go through, because as they go through the emerging markets, they become less expensive. And I completely understand the economics of it, but it's just terrible that there's a billion people in the world that are being treated at a level that I treated patients 20 years ago. Right. So now let's fast forward to today. Social media is a global phenomenon, right? So it doesn't matter where you are. If you have a cell phone, you can see something that I post on social media, unless you're in a country that limits the content, right? So I'm obsessed with unlocking our treatments and giving people information so that they can find inspiration and say, hey, you know what? I see what, Dr. Bicknell is doing in a town in Elmhurst, and he's making it look really easy, and he's showing me all the steps. I'm making my life really hard. Maybe I can learn just through free resources and social media how to do that, right? And I think that it's just so fun when you go then to, like, the last time I was in Thailand, I was in Bangkok, and I had a bunch of people who were young that were like, we've watched your material hundreds of times, and we're copying what you're doing on these webinars, and we're able to get results that we could never get before, right? And I mean, like, that's how I learned, right? I read the Damon handbook like 10 times in a row, and it was just 10 cases that Dr. Damon treated. And I just studied them and I applied those principles, and I was able to increase my level. So now it's just, we've created this education side that is more about, and I don't like the words because they seem so cheesy, but democratizing information just means giving information where anybody can access it, regardless of financial or geographical barrier, right? And that's really what we're trying to do.
No, yeah, let's talk about that because, over the course of my career, and now I am, and I hopefully people don't think I'm either trying to make you blush or exaggerating.
Yeah.
Mike, you've probably been one of the most influential orthodontists in my career and helped me be successful in this profession. I probably, as a sales leader and at one point a local sales rep in Minnesota, I probably sent dozens of people to your office for what you used to do as mentoring. And I got to see the impact that those people had visiting you, and it was tremendous. And so first of all, thank you. But I think that your passion for teaching, what you're showing them, led to this next iteration with Ultimate Orthodontic Academy. And I can't tell you how excited I am that you started this, but also that it's a partner, your academy and you personally, but just as importantly, the academy is a partner with P.O.P as well. Yeah. So tell us how that got started. Tell us how that works, because I think it's really exciting.
It's so funny how things happen, right? I don't think I didn't come out of residency saying that I wanted to be a global educator, right? Like, that's kind of a weird thing to say. But what happens is you follow these pathways. And we talked about this so much today about starting out being a private practitioner and trying to learn from people who knew the secrets to unlocking a successful practice, and then trying to instill those into your own practice. And you see this personal growth and development, right? But what happened was, once the pandemic hit in 2001, right before that, we were doing some speaking, and I realized that globally there was a lot of work to be done, right? It just didn't seem fair to me that half of the world didn't have access to the information that the other half did. And I was just raised a different way, I guess, I don't like inequality as much as it is. And I just know that I'm a lucky person to be born to my parents in the United States. And, I really believe that, right? It could have went so many different ways. So I really like gratitude. I really find that I'm happy, knowing that I'm living a great life and I've got good people around me. But when I see that it just seems like it's a little bit unbalanced, it really kind of created an issue. So the pandemic hits and we all kind of tighten up. But then when we came out of that pandemic, global, like, education was destroyed, right? There was really no meetings, there's no community, there's no connection. And there's a whole group of young orthodontists that didn't get to participate in that inspirational educational events, right? There were no more meetings. So there was all these people. And at the same time, we're in an orthodontic technological revolution, right? Technology is just slamming forward. But if you take technology without education, it's pointless. You have to learn how to use the technology. So once we were able to get back out there and start teaching, I just saw the same questions being asked over and over. And I found that I was just kind of repeating the same message. So funny enough, we use this program called Trainual in our office. It's basically a modern day training tool for your team. We've used it for years. It's basically documenting your SOPs through video, audio, and also multimedia content. So I was sitting there and I was talking to my wife, Catherine, and I'm like, I'm just going to put together a small course on how to use, let's say, the Damon Ultimate system, right? So as I started doing this, I started realizing that there was a whole bunch of other things that you could do. I mean, people just don't want to take an online course. They want to join a community. Some people want to come to your office and learn. We have a ton of mentors that come in. People want to come to your office and do an in-office experience. People want one-on-one coaching. As we started realizing what an actual education site needs to do, we started realizing that it was a really quite a complex undertaking. So, my wife, who was helping to run the orthodontic office, she's got her MBA, super bright, more on the business side. She kind of moved over to education. We started grabbing a small team to do it, and what we realized is it is really difficult to create an education company. There's not a model for it, right? I can open up another orthodontic office easily, but to create a startup education company that has to create a brand, create trust, create a market, it's been interesting. At the same time, it's been a lot of fun. So what we're doing is we're just trying to take all the things that we've refined in our practice, all the things that we know work, all the things that have data behind them, right? So transparency is really important. If I can show a process, I can show that it works, then I want to just reveal that. Now, if somebody else has a better process, great. But I really don't see anywhere right now that you can go online and learn just really, really great things in an easy way. It's difficult, right? I mean, there's a lot of webinars out there. There's a lot of company kind of sponsored stuff, but we wanted to create an independent, highly regarded, well-trusted education brand that is almost looked at as one of the highest tier education brands in the world, right? And it's going to take time to do that. It's going to take brand trust, which means we can't just go out there and put products out there to make money. We have to put products out there so people can learn. And that's where we are right now. So we're about a year into the journey of creating this company. We've got some great employees. We've got a lot of opportunity. Joining P.O.P was great. And the reason why is because P.O.P, from what I see, has created a group of like-minded orthodontists that want to band together to form that community to create great outcomes and have successful business models, right? And doing it on your own is difficult. And I've learned that, the whole, corporate model, DSO model, the organized dentistry model unlocks a lot of resources for the private practitioner, but the private practitioner doesn't get to benefit from it, right? The company does. And it's so frustrating that the backbone of orthodontics is coming from private practitioners that don't have access to the resources or pricing. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. Pricing. You can say it. Network effect, pricing,
yeah,
business services agreement.
Why should I have to join a group of people that are then just going to take the profits from my company and make money off of it when I can do that as a large group like P.O.P? But before P.O.P, there wasn't really any other buying group. I mean, we had some organizations that could find deals, right? And we all know that there's some people like that, but it wasn't a community, right? And when Catherine told me about P.O.P and what you were doing, Scott, you told me the same thing. It was really intriguing right away because it's a group of people that are trying to band together to keep their autonomy, to keep their practices, but reduce costs and gain advantages on a business side that you really quite need in today's marketplace. I mean, when I joked about being a digital orthodontist 20 years ago, of having a digital camera and a digital pan-sef, I don't know if it's even possible to play in the world that I play in right now. I get to use the best appliances, everything digital, CBCT, iCats, TADs, lasers. I play in that world because I have a successful business and I have some cash that I'm willing to spend on that. But it's got to be really hard for a new practice owner to play in that realm because, a scanner is $30,000, right? An iCat is $150,000. TADs are $150. There's all these things that just start to take away what essentially is your cash flow to live. And then what happens is these new practitioners say, I can't afford it. And to me, you can't afford not to buy it, right? But something like P.O.P helps us do it, right? So, when I look at what we're trying to do on the education side, it's kind of what P.O.P's trying to do on the clinical support side. I'm trying to give people all of the secrets and all the information that we've learned to be insanely effective and highly efficient. When we look at, I was at a Gauge presentation the other day, and they were talking about cost per visit. And they said that the national average right now, cost per visit, is if you take your case fee and then divide it by your number of average visits. Right now, that's in the high 200s, right? some practices low 300s. I mean, we're in the high sixes, low sevens, right? So if I look at how much from a cost per visit in our average patient, and average means average, we're averaging everything, our case fee divided by our average number of treatment visits, we're in the 700s for cost per visit, which is why we're highly driven to be as efficient, as effective as possible. If I add one or two more appointments to on average, because I'm getting inefficient, then that's going to go from $700 to like $550, right? And it just shows that the more you know, and the more you try, and the more you have these tools, which, by the way, with today's technology, the tools are easy. It doesn't require, you don't have to be an ortho genius to create beautiful smiles in 9 visits. Okay. You have to use technology, and you have to use it properly. Right. And that's what we try to show with our academy, is how to use it properly. It's just funny though, right? Most people are kind of, most people are like, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. And, I want to bang my head against the wall sometimes, when I'm talking to somebody and they're like, yeah, I'm good. Our practice runs great. And then I'm like, well, how many average visits does it take? They're like, we don't know. And I'm like, well, talk to me about a patient journey. And they're like 20. I'm like, wouldn't it be great to treat that patient in 10 visits? And they're like, no, we're good. Like, we're fine. And I'm like, okay.
I'd be curious to get your take on this, because this is the conversation I felt like is an interesting one. In your practice, I don't know what your aligner to fixed case mix is now, but talk a little bit about that whole concept. That the only way, I think the part that I found amazing about your lectures is that you were able to show that you could, do a fixed case and like you just said, 9, 10 visits, maybe even less, with great clinical outcomes without compromising those things. But, a lot of times when I would talk to a doctor, they didn't think it was possible. Right.
No.
And so maybe talk a little bit about that and this whole concept of what you're accomplishing, but you're kind of doing, stealing something out of the aligner playbook is that you're basically saying there's another way to be efficient, and it doesn't have to be just aligners.
Sure.
Say it that bluntly.
Look, I think that's great. And I think that first off, it's funny, even if you show it, people sometimes don't believe it, right? I think that, you're challenging somebody's belief. And if their belief is that it can't be done and you're showing that it can, then somebody has to be open to that belief. But most people with cognitive dissonance, right, they reject something that is part of their core belief. And if somebody has been working really hard and they see that this is the best they can do, and then somebody's just kind of saying, hey, look, this is what we're doing. Some people dismiss it, right, as just being fake. So hence why we take 7 sets of photographs on every single patient in our practice. When I go ahead and I teach cases, I show not just the beginning and the end. I show the beginning, the middle, and the end. Everything is there with photographs so that we can say, look, we're being as transparent as possible. Here's how we started. Here's what we did. Here's what we did. Here's how we finished. And let's talk about that. Now, what we've learned with at least using, Damon Ultima, being a passive ligation person for 20 years, there was still a lot at the end that you had to do that was artistic. You had to bend some wire to get really great case outcomes. And that was because there's an engineering issue with all brackets. It has nothing to do with PSL or ASL or twins. It's just, if you take a box and you put it in a box, there's a little wiggle room, right? So that's the basis of it. What Damon Ultima did, and they did it quite well, is they kept the system passive, but also created full control in 3 dimensions. And it's not, I can go through that in any presentation, but what it's done for me is it's allowed me to partition my treatments into 3 distinct phases. Now, those 3 distinct phases have 3 distinct predictable endpoints. So we took that and we just devoured that information and figured out how to partition that into a very efficient treatment plan. And then we run these treatment plans by being a coach. Our team is the care provider, right? Before, I was the quarterback. I was in on every play, and it was exhausting. Now, with technology, protocols, a full expression system, we're able to be a coach and say, hey, look, this is how we run this playbook, and this is how it works 95% of the time. Now, to answer your question, we do the same thing with aligners now. We've figured out how to partition our aligner treatments into the same efficiency because what we noticed as I started looking at my data for fixed cases is that we were getting destroyed with aligners. Our aligners were very inefficient and not profitable at all, right? And the reason why is our aligner protocols were, we wanted to achieve the same outcomes. We wanted to make sure that we weren't done until we were happy. And unfortunately, they were multiple refinements. The workflow was just, it kept going, and it just wasn't anywhere near as efficient as braces. To answer your question, we're about 22% aligners and the rest braces. We were up to 42%. In 2016, we went on the whole, let's do the aligner thing. And we started scaling aligners, and we got up to like 42%. And what I realized is that I wasn't happy. I was doing a lot of digital. I was working at home a ton. I wasn't part of the patient experience. The patient's experience wasn't going as well as I thought it could, even though we were studying, we were learning, we were taking all the courses, we were applying the protocols. But when you scale, I just think that if everyone really looks at their finishes and looks at their treatment efficiencies, if you're really honest with it, the aligner finishes are not as ideal as our fixed, and our aligner efficiencies were not as high as our fixed. So we changed that. We tried to figure out a way into it. And over the last year and a half, we've really redone our aligner protocols. We brought on monitoring. We have different stages, and if somebody's not meeting their stage, then they get switched automatically to Ultima. So we found ways now to do it. But that whole idea of the plastic employee, we never saw it. We couldn't. And let me put it this way: in my hands, I couldn't scale aligners and get amazing outcomes as high of a percentage of time as I could with fixed appliances. But the problem is that nobody wants braces for 2 years. So we solved that problem, right? Our average treatment time in our office is between 14 and 15 months, and our average number of visits is between 9 and 10, right? So we now have an ability to say, hey, we can fix this in just a little over a year. And we're doing that now with aligners and braces. So it's a really fun world to live in.
Jason, I could talk to Dr. Bicknell all night long. I honestly could. Which we've done that a time or two, talking about the business of ortho and clinical ortho. But Jason, I suspect we have to put a wrap on this.
Yeah, unfortunately. But there's always more times that we can get together and talk to Dr. Bicknell. But we do have to get going today, and I want to thank Dr. Bicknell for joining us. It's been a true pleasure. And if you want to see Dr. Bicknell or get to know what he's up to, you can go to his website. It is smilesbyaos.com. Go there and you'll be able to see everything that he has to offer. You've got 2 offices, correct? One in Elmhurst, Illinois, and one in Forest Park.
For our doctors that are out there listening, check out Ultimate Orthodontic Academy as well. And then, connect with your Ormco rep. He's probably speaking at a venue near you at some point this year, right?
Yeah. It's been really fun. I mean, one of the things that we didn't get to mention is that we created the Ultimate Orthodontic Academy as we took an entire 4,000 square foot space next to our 4,000 square foot practice. So, just 9 miles from O'Hare International Airport, we've got this global education site that has a full functioning ortho clinic and a full functioning kind of lecture center, education center. So, we want this to become, a global education center where we can show techniques, we can have didactic, we can host events. This is what we want to do, because I do think that after 20 years of being absolutely obsessed with orthodontics, having a team that is amazing, having the ability to put this into a modern learning approach. All right, we've copied a lot of the masterclass style classes, and it hasn't been easy. We had to engage this company out of the UK that leads the field in medical online education, and I've learned a ton. But by being able to do all of this, it's definitely made our lives a little bit more complicated. But I do think that when I hear people say how much they've learned or how much it means to them, or the fact that they can treat patients better, I feel that our efforts are treating, and hopefully over the course of the next 20 years will help treat millions of other kids and patients in the world. And I think that that's truly what gets us up in the morning and allows us to put the investment of time and money into this secondary offshoot passion project of a business, which is the Ultimate Orthodontic Academy. So yes, anyone's more than welcome to come to the practice, more than welcome to check out what we do.
So, hey, Mike, that's a good point, because they can come to your practice. They can come to, there's in-office courses this March and September coming in 2025. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah. And if you want to see what we're doing on the ortho side, there's the reps will set up mentorships for us where you can hang out with us all day. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of opportunities.
And if people want to learn about P.O.P, what do they need to know, Scott?
All they got to do is figure out a way to get a hold of me. I'll set up some time to talk with you, learn a little bit about you and your practice, share some of the exciting things that we've got going on with the group. You can visit our website and schedule an intake call, but really excited about P.O.P. I mean, we're about to trip over the 100 practice mark with about 160 locations and 150 doctors. And as we grow, it's just, I like to think it's just empowering the private practice orthodontist. So
go to pop-ortho.com, click on that button at the top right, and schedule your meeting with Scott. Sorry to cut you off, Scott.
No, that's it.
That's it. And if you are wanting to get your marketing looked at, you can get a free analysis at Brain Bites Creative. Caroline will give you a $5,000 value analysis, go through everything from your social media to your SEO. You can reach her at caroline@brainbitescreative.com. On behalf of P.O.P Podcast and everybody on the P.O.P team, we appreciate you, and we will see you next time.
P.O.P. Podcast.